Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the first episode where I discussed about my journey with the title of Widowed by Motor Neurone Disease. So in these following episodes, I'm going to be sharing my journey from where I began to where I was widowed and carrying on to how I coped being a widow after my husband died of motor neurone disease. It is a very touching journey. It is a very painful journey. Lots of tears are going to be shed, but it's got to be done. And I got to say that the pain has been numbed. So let's start with the definition so that we can have a bit of context, we can have a bit of understanding of what this disease is about. So what is motor neuron disease? So motor neuron disease, which is commonly known as MND for short, is a group of neurodegenerative disorders that are characterized by the progressive loss of motor neurons. So as you can see, this disease is progressive. It's not like it happens overnight. It is progressive disease. So the nerve cells that control the voluntary muscles. So this is the loss of the motor neurons that are connected to the nerve cells that control the voluntary muscles. Well, I'm not a doctor, I might be a nurse, but it's hard to understand. But I started to research more after it started to affect me. So as these neurons degenerate and die, the muscles that they control also weaken and waste away. So if the nerve dies, the muscle that is controlled by that nerve, the muscle die, and then the muscle weakens, the muscle wastes away, leading to increasing disability. So you can just imagine if all the nerves that are controlling the muscles on your legs die, your muscles die, you can't move your legs. So the condition affects both the upper neurons that are located in the brain and the lower neurons that are located in the brainstem and the spinal cord. So it's the brain and the spinal cord that is affected. So what are the signs and symptoms? What does this condition present with? I got to say that for my husband, it started as a backache. He used to say, oh, my back is sore, and then you'll be taking Brufen, and then I'll be saying, oh, Manu, you've been lifting all these old people in the nursing homes. You've been doing bad manual handling. You need to do good manual handling, and then I'll be telling him off. But anyway, the symptoms is the weakness of the limbs. I think that's it. It is the main one. It's the weakening of the limbs. But I got to say that the weakening of the limbs, in our case, it didn't come as the first symptom. For us, the first symptoms was the muscle cramps. He used to experience muscle cramps on his back and then muscle cramps on his legs. There was some like twitching movements that he couldn't control. So it's muscle cramps and twitching, and I think they call this fasciculations. I can't say that word, but anyway, that for us, that was the first thing that Manuel was suffering with. He would just like a twitch. You see, like a twitch, even when he's not moving, it will just twitch on its own. And then the other sign is the difficulty in speaking and swallowing. And for our case, those came like in the later stages, especially at the end. Really, that's when I wouldn't be able to understand what he's trying to tell me, because the speech was so distorted, I couldn't understand. And then the respiratory muscles weaken as well. So that's the other symptom. The respiratory muscles, they weaken, especially the diaphragm. For us, it was in the middle stage, and I know he had to be transferred to Stoke-on-Trent. I think it was Stoke-on-Trent, because they've got a special unit there for people that are suffering from motor neurone disease. And then when he was discharged from there, he came with a non-invasive ventilator, which they call a NIPPY. I don't know why they call it a NIPPY. It's NIPPY. So I don't know whether that's just like a name. It's not an abbreviation for anything, but yeah, he came back with a nippy that was helping him breathe, because the muscles are weak, so you can't expand. So they have to. It's non-ventilation, so they push the air into the lungs. So what causes a motor neuron disease? What causes MND? I asked myself this question 100 times. I did so much research because I thought if I know what causes it, then I can fix it. I can help my husband heal from this condition. But the cause is unknown. It is believed to be a combination of genetic and environmental factors. So either it's in your genes, it's in the family, or it's environmental factors, whatever is in your environment. So the cause really is unknown. What about the prevalence? How common is this condition? Guys, this will shock you. This made me cry. Just knowing that approximately 5 to 10% are inherited. Only 5 to 10% of the cases are inherited. So you can see that it's not common. Even if it's an inherited disease, it's really not common. And then the remaining cases that they've researched, the causes are sporadic with no clear family history. So people, they will just get this condition, they'll be diagnosed with this condition, but there will be no family history whatsoever, either from the parents, the grandparents, or going backwards. There will be no history that is attached to the condition at all. So which makes it hard for me, especially. It made me hard. It was so hard for me to believe that this is genetic, because I had never heard of this condition in my whole nursing career, in my whole life. I'd never heard of this condition. I'd never heard that Manuel's family had this condition, or his grandparents, going down on the family history. I never ever heard of this condition. So it for me, in my mind, I thought it can't be genetic because I've never heard of it. Because if something that's genetic, at least if it skips a generation, at least it should be told that, somebody is going to be able to remember that, oh no, so and so, the grandfather had this, or the great-grandfather had this, or the grandmother had this condition. In our case, nothing. And coming from Africa, like I'm saying, I had never ever heard of this condition. Even doing my nurse training, doing all my research, I had never heard of this condition. So it makes me wonder. Now I can see I can see it's common, but it makes me wonder whether this condition affects part of the world or another part of the world. I don't know. So how do we diagnose a motor neuron? Mostly it's about history. The doctors have to take a detailed history of the presenting symptoms. And I remember when they first tried to diagnose my husband, the neurosurgeon made him walk on a straight line. So he will say, just walk and follow that line. So you have to follow the line straight. It's like when you are drunk, they're trying to check if you're drunk, and then they say walk in a straight line. So if you can't walk in a straight line, you're like wobbly. That's how they diagnose it. Other tests that they do include electromyography, EMG. They also do nerve conduction studies. The nerve conduction studies, I think they are common. I've heard of that. But they did all those tests for my husband. They did the EMG. They did the nerve conduction studies. They did MRI scans. Yet lots and lots of different of blood tests, because they do need to rule out other conditions, because they need to rule out other stuff, really. The blood tests are to rule out any other conditions. So they will be able to see from the CRP, from the inflammation markers, from the hormones, hopefully. I think because it's still under research, really. So I know I can't really fault the hospital and the consultants in this case, because I know for a fact they did all the tests. And still they said they couldn't find anything on the test that pointed that it is definitely motor neuron disease. So as much as we have this condition and we want a diagnosis, sometimes the medical team can't just give us a diagnosis, because some of these tests, they're not conclusive enough for them to say, yes, this is what is causing this condition. So for me, they put all the factors together and they say, considering all these factors, we're going to just reach a diagnosis. What is the treatment? How do we treat motor neuron disease? What is the cure for motor neuron disease? This is painful. Up to now, it's painful because there is no cure. If there was a cure, my husband would still be here. So there is no cure for motor neuron disease. At the moment, there isn't a cure. But treatments focus on managing symptoms and improving the quality of life. I'm not sure about all the other hospitals where people get nursed, but I'm gonna say my husband was at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, so I can't fault them. They did everything. So the treatment focuses on managing the symptoms and improving quality of life. And I know that they made everything that they could to make sure they improved the quality of his life, because they say to me, to both of us, they said, we're just gonna reach a diagnosis and say he's got motor neuron disease as a diagnosis whilst we're still investigating, so the systems can kick in. So let's just finish on the treatment. There are tablets. I know of only two that are used. There is a riluzole. My husband was put on the riluzole, and the other one is called edaravone. But my husband was on the riluzole. This is supposed to help slower the progression, if you could say. So it helps lower the condition so that the disease doesn't progress as fast. I'm not sure whether that, from the medical point of view, is helping them buy time, so that as the research goes on, they're buying time so that they could hit a research that they're going to get a cure. But anyway, it's managing symptoms and making somebody live as comfortable as possible. And the part of the management is physiotherapy, because as I've said, the muscles, they're dead. So you are just like you can't move, you can't reposition yourself. So you need to be repositioned so you don't get pressure sores, you don't get further muscle wasting. And speech therapy, for me, I say it for my husband, it was towards the end when I could hardly hear the words, he couldn't form the words properly. But speech therapy is part of that. The exercises are just to try and keep the muscles active as much, not improve as such, but to try and maintain whatever function you've got of those muscles. And the other way we promote that is with nutritional support, the therapy with nutritional support. And in most cases, in our case, they offered my husband straight away a PEG tube, which is a tube that is inserted into your stomach, and then you get fed through that tube, because you can't swallow anymore because the muscles are weak. So you could choke on the food. So you get offered a PEG tube. I know my husband refused that. He totally blank refused to have a PEG tube. So the other support that you get is what I said is the non-invasive ventilation, which is called a NIPI. So that's to help with the breathing. I know my son, he was only 3 years old at that point. He used to be so naughty. He would stand on the tube and then the air is not getting pushed in. And then my husband would start to panic because now he can't breathe. Oh, bless the kids. Anyway, so there's two main types. The ALS, which is the amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. This is the most common one, and this is the one that my husband had. It's called ALS. It's also known as the Lou Gehrig's disease. Lou Gehrig's. I'm not sure if I'm saying that properly. Sorry, Louis, if I'm saying your name wrongly, but it's Lou Gehrig's disease, and this is the most common form of the motor neuron disease. He had this one, and this one specifically, it involves the degeneration of the upper and the lower motor neurons. So it's the generation of the upper and the lower motor neurons. So I know in our case, I think it was the legs first, but I can't remember. But it does lead to progressive decline in muscle function. I know the carers did, once the hospital says we're just going to diagnose him with motor neuron disease, it was quick. They straight away, the community team came and put a stair lift in place. So we had a stair lift so he could go up and down. He was still able to slightly stand and transfer. I think his upper arms were not as affected initially. It was the legs first, so it was easier to transfer. Even up to when he was on a wheelchair, you could still use his finger to control the wheelchair. So it was mostly for him, it was the lower limbs that were affected more than the upper limbs, the hands. So what are the characteristics of ALS? So like I said, it's a rapid progression. It's rapid in progression compared to the other forms of motor neuron disease. So the ALS progresses quite rapidly. I'm not sure which one Stephen Hawking had, but I guess Stephen Hawking might have had the other one, because we all know that Stephen Hawking lived for years, and I used to watch him. I used to follow him a lot, and I used to hope that it's okay even if my husband has got motor neuron disease, but if he's gonna live as long as Stephen Hawking, even if he's on a wheelchair, it doesn't matter as long as he's alive. It didn't happen like that. So anyway, the initial symptoms often include muscle weakness or stiffness in one limb, slurred speech, or swallowing difficulties. So for us, it was the stiffness in the limbs, and then it was the swallowing difficulties next, and then the slurred speech was later on. So I'm not sure how we differentiate how it is. I'm sure it's different for different people. As the disease progresses, patients experience increased muscle weakness, atrophy, and fasciculations, eventually leading to severe impairment in movement, in speech, swallowing, and breathing. So for us, the swallowing was quite right at the end, but the movement was totally first, and then it was the breathing, and then it was the speech, and then it was the swallowing right at the end. Guys, so what is the prognosis of ALS? So the prognosis for ALS varies, but on average, the life expectancy after diagnosis is 3 to 5 years. For us, after diagnosis, my husband was given 18 months to live. They say it is rapid, it's very progressive. They gave him 18 months to live. He pulled 2 years and he was gone. So from diagnosis, 2 years and he was dead. So I'm sorry, I know I said I'll try and be strong. It's no longer as painful. It's the memories. I've learned to live with it. I've learned to appreciate people that are living with the condition, and appreciate and respect people that have been widowed by motor neuron and are living with it. Anyway, it's good to know that some patients will live longer, with a small percentage surviving more than 10 years. We all know that Stephen Hawking was one of those that lived way more than 10 years. I'm sure I have to actually dig deeper into the research that Stephen Hawking was involved in, because I know that his life impacted so many, and he's involved with so much charity, and he was involved with so much stuff to do with motor neuron disease. But I guess in my defense, I could say as soon as my husband died of it, I just shut myself down and just thought, I'm just gonna try and cope and not dig for the stuff after my husband is died. So anyway, what about the research and the support? So ongoing research is aiming to uncover the underlying mechanisms of ALS, to explore genetic factors and develop new treatments. Support organizations provide resources, advocacy, and assistance for patients and their families. I remember there was a time in the news where they said, they found a cure for motor neuron. And in the news at that point, it was like this was in the USA. And I remember thinking, I'm prepared to sell everything that we've got so that my husband can go to the USA to have this treatment. But as we know, with all research, they're going to say today that they found a treatment, but then it has to go through the trials and the trials and the trials. So it's not something like they found a cure today and then it's on the shelves tomorrow. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen like that. I did pray and pray to say if only my husband could last longer until the treatment is on the shelves. But unfortunately, that did not happen. So guys, so this is just a brief description of motor neuron disease, so that when I go on with the other episodes on our life, on how it affected my husband and how it affected myself and the children, you understand what the disease is like. So on the next episode, I'm gonna be talking about how we started. I'm gonna talk about how I met my handsome husband. I will attach his picture so you understand why it touched my heart so much. I'm sure if it was a man that was not as caring, that was not as loving, it wouldn't have been as painful. But they say the good ones die. It's only the bad ones that don't die. And I can honestly say my husband was one of the the best of the best. He was one of the best husband he was to me, and he was friendly to everybody. So anyway, subscribe so that you can be alerted as soon as I've recorded the next one. The next one, I'm going to be talking, like I said, about how I met my husband. We met during nurse training. We were both nurses. So it's gonna be the love story of a lifetime. You don't want to miss this one. And honestly, I'm gonna advise children, please, if there's children around, guys, don't let them watch the next episode, because it's just gonna be as raw as it is, because the romance, the sex was just out of this world. Honestly, as you can see, all I've got to do is just think about it and just be so happy. I mean, guys, I know all of you that are married, that are in relationships, you must have the best sex and the best romance, but mine was second to none. And I can't wait to share with you. So please make sure that there's no children on the next episode. So until then, subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a thing, and like my video, and please do share. This is for awareness on how I'm coping and how I coped, and the whole aim is to help other people that are coping or are widowed by other condition, can be any condition, is to share the journey. So the more we share, the more we expose these things, is the more we can help other people. So all the best. See you on the episode number 2.